The first shot wasn't fired by the aliens, it was us. And that's why they were terrified. Aeliana Voss watched as the massive alien fleet loomed overhead, dark and ominous against the backdrop of a dying Earth. The Malak'Ra, an empire of conquerors with a thirst for destruction, had finally come. For years, humanity had lived in fear of this day, but now it was here. Their invasion had already begun. The cities were falling. The last remnants of civilization were crumbling. But Aeliana had a plan. A final, desperate gamble that could shift the balance. "Target locked, Captain." Jax's voice came over her earpiece, steady and calm. He was in the tactical bay, working with the crew to line up the shot. His tone was tight, but he knew better than anyone, this was their only shot at survival. Aeliana didn't look away from the command center view, her hands gripping the armrests of the captain's chair, her knuckles turning white. The fleet was circling Earth like a predator waiting to pounce, but they had underestimated one thing: humanity's resolve. "Fire!" Aeliana said, her voice low but firm, carrying the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The first salvo was their last chance. A piercing hum filled the room, and the world seemed to stop as the missile fired, streaking toward the heart of the Malak'Ra fleet. Aeliana's heart skipped a beat. She held her breath, her fingers still clutching the console as if the world depended on it. There was no turning back now. The missile hit with a thunderous explosion. For a moment, the universe seemed to pause, stunned by the sheer power of the impact. The flagship of the Malak'Ra, the Zivithar, shuddered, its towering silhouette splitting in half. Flames and debris scattered through space, like the shattered remains of their greatest enemy. But the victory was short-lived. "They're retaliating." Jax's voice came again, this time more urgent. The calm facade was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of war. "The Malak'Ra are regrouping. They've already launched their counterattack." Aeliana's pulse quickened. They hadn't had enough time to fully cripple the enemy fleet. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. "Send the rest of the fleet in," Aeliana ordered, rising to her feet. She glanced at her crew, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and determination. They were on the edge, teetering between victory and complete annihilation. But Aeliana wouldn't let them fall now. Not after all they had sacrificed. "Captain," Jax continued, his voice tense, "their reinforcements are arriving faster than expected. We need to fall back and regroup." "Not yet," Aeliana snapped, her jaw set in determination. "We press on. This battle isn't over until we make sure their command structure is gone." Her words carried a weight none of them could ignore. The Malak'Ra had counted on humanity's collapse. They thought they had won, that Earth was already a lost cause. But this was the first strike, a symbol of defiance, the start of something bigger. The Malak'Ra might have underestimated humanity's will to fight, but Aeliana was about to show them just how wrong they were. The chaos of battle continued outside, but inside the command center, Aeliana's mind raced. Every decision she made now could mean the difference between life and death. The situation was dire, but she had always been a strategist, able to think ahead, to predict the enemy's next move. "We've disabled their communications for now," Jax said, tapping his console rapidly. "But it won't hold long. They're trying to reroute their systems." Aeliana nodded, her focus never leaving the view of the shattered Zivithar in the distance. There was no time to bask in their small victory. She knew the Malak'Ra had another card up their sleeve. They always did. "We'll hit their fleet while they're disoriented," Aeliana said, tapping into the war strategies she had been refining since the moment the invasion began. "Focus all fire on their secondary command vessels. If we can cripple their leadership, we can win this war." She watched as the remaining resistance ships shifted into position, forming up in an intricate pattern of offensive and defensive strategies. It was a daring move, and Aeliana could see the uncertainty in the eyes of her crew. They were all in this together now, no room for hesitation. "Captain," one of the officers called out, her voice trembling with both fear and awe. "They're activating a new weapon. It's bigger than anything we've seen." The hairs on the back of Aeliana's neck stood up. The Malak'Ra had always kept their most devastating weapons hidden. She could feel the weight of their last gambit pressing down on her, and she had no choice but to act fast. Deploy all fighters. We need to keep them distracted while we take out their weapon systems, Aeliana commanded, her voice colder now, sharper. Prepare for an all-out assault. As her crew scrambled to execute the plan, Aeliana made her way to the comms room. She needed to get the message out to the rest of the resistance, to rally the scattered forces across Earth. They had one shot at this. If they didn't pull together, if they didn't act quickly, humanity would be lost forever. The minutes stretched on as Aeliana watched the digital display of the battlefield unfold before her. Her fingers gripped the edges of the console, her mind racing with calculations and possibilities. The resistance ships darted through space, evading enemy fire while pushing forward in a show of defiance. It was a dance, a deadly ballet between life and death, each move calculated, each second precious. Then, the signal came, a brief flash of data on her console. Captain, we've found the weak point, Jack said, his voice crackling through the comms. It's their reactor. If we hit it directly, we can bring down their entire fleet. Aeliana's breath caught in her chest. This was it. The moment they had all been waiting for. But it wasn't just about the fleet anymore. It was about proving that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the dark. Full power to the main guns, Aeliana ordered, her voice filled with unrelenting resolve. Let's end this. The Horizon's Fury, humanity's flagship, surged forward, its weapons primed and ready. Aeliana watched as the shot fired, the beam of energy cutting through the cold expanse of space, a blinding strike of pure defiance. The Zivithar-S reactor exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The shockwave rippled through the surrounding Malak'Ra fleet, and one by one, their ships began to crumble. It was a victory. It was small, but it was humanity's victory. But Aeliana knew the fight wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The Malak'Ra would come back, but now, they would know, humanity was no longer just a pawn. They were a force to be reckoned with. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. As the last of the enemy ships fell into the void, a transmission crackled through. Aeliana's eyes widened as she read the message. You may have won this battle, Captain Voss, the alien voice said, dripping with malice. But the war is far from over. This is only the beginning. Aeliana clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. The real fight was just beginning. And this time, humanity would make sure it was the last. Then let's finish it, she said quietly, her voice filled with unshakable determination. The victory had come at a steep cost. The explosion of the Zivithar had shaken Aeliana to her core, but it was far from enough. The Malak'Ra had lost a command vessel, but they weren't retreating. If anything, they were more determined than ever to break humanity. Aeliana stood on the command deck of the Horizon's Fury, her fingers clenched around the edge of the tactical display. The room buzzed with the tense energy of a crew that had just seen their first real victory, but the atmosphere was heavy with the realization that the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. That should have done it, Jack said, his voice rough. His eyes were glued to the view outside, where the remains of the Malak'Ra fleet drifted like debris. Their flagship's gone, and their forces are scattered. They're not recovering from this in a day. Aeliana shook her head. We can't assume that. We've only taken one step toward victory. The Malak'Ra won't let this go. They'll regroup, they'll retaliate, and they'll come back harder. She glanced at Jax. We've only cracked the surface. Jax turned to her, frustration lining his features. I know, Captain. But right now, we've got the upper hand. We need to use it. The truth stung. Despite the bold words, Aeliana knew the Malak'Ra had a weapon they hadn't revealed yet. Something in their intelligence reports suggested it. A weapon capable of turning the tide in their favor with terrifying speed. The attack on Earth was only a part of the Malak'Ra's grand plan. If they didn't act swiftly, they risked losing everything they had fought for. Contact the rest of the fleet, Aeliana ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. We push forward, while we still can. We need to get to their secondary command center and cripple their war machine before they regroup. The crew scrambled to execute her orders, and Aeliana's mind raced, processing the next steps. They needed to cut off the Malak'Ra's ability to communicate and coordinate. Without their fleet's central command, they would be forced into a disarrayed retreat, just as they had when their flagship was destroyed. "Captain," one of the officers called, interrupting her thoughts. "We've intercepted a Malak'Ra communication. They've activated their superweapon. It's ready." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Activate their superweapon?" she muttered, barely able to grasp the full weight of the message. "They were hiding it this whole time." Jax's face went pale. "They've been planning this for years. And now we've triggered it." Aeliana slammed her fist against the console. "Then we stop it before it's too late." The horizon's fury leapt into warp, the stars around them blurring as the ship shot forward at breakneck speed. The mission was clear: destroy the Malak'Ra superweapon, or face extinction. But the closer they got to the coordinates, the stronger Aeliana's sense of dread became. The superweapon wasn't just a threat, it was a catalyst for their destruction. If the Malak'Ra had activated it, it meant they were prepared to wipe humanity out in one swift blow. As the ship tore through the stars, Aeliana's thoughts turned inward. She thought about the mission, about Earth's final hope, but her mind kept returning to the fact that they hadn't yet learned everything. There was something deeper at play. Something sinister behind the Malak'Ra's motivations. They weren't just here to conquer. There was an endgame she hadn't yet pieced together. "Approaching the target," the navigator called out, snapping Aeliana from her thoughts. "We've entered the perimeter of the Malak'Ra's defense grid. Prepare to breach," Aeliana ordered, her voice unwavering. "Full power to forward shields." The ship rocked as they hit the outer layers of the defense grid, the Malak'Ra's automated turrets opening fire. Aeliana's crew moved with precision, responding to each new barrage with practiced efficiency. The hull groaned under the pressure, but the ship held steady. "Shields holding at 80%. Jax called from the tactical station, his eyes scanning the incoming fire. "We've got a clear path to the core. But we've got incoming bombers, 5 minutes. Aeliana's pulse quickened. They didn't have 5 minutes. "Deploy countermeasures," she barked. "All fighters launch. Give us an opening." The next 5 minutes passed in a blur of combat. The crew moved with incredible synchronization as they defended the horizon's fury from the swarming Malak'Ra bombers. Fighters engaged in a deadly dance outside the ship's protective shields, explosions lighting up the black void like fireworks. Aeliana gritted her teeth, her mind constantly calculating the best course of action. "Bombers destroyed," Jax reported, a slight edge of relief in his voice. "We're through the outer defenses. Moving toward the core." Aeliana didn't feel the relief Jax did. They were still too close to the superweapon, and she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. The clock was ticking. "Where is it?" she asked, her eyes scanning the tactical display for any sign of the weapon's location. "Directly ahead," Jax said. "It's located in the central command station. We're on course to breach it in less than a minute." "Prepare the boarding teams," Aeliana commanded. She turned to the communications officer. "Send a warning to the fleet. We need to buy time. This is our last chance to take them down." The horizon's fury broke through the final defensive wall, and they were inside the heart of the enemy's territory. Aeliana's heart pounded as she watched the tactical display light up, marking their path toward the superweapon's core. The room was silent as the crew prepared for the next phase, boarding and disabling the weapon. They came to a halt just outside the command station. The doors to the station stood before them, heavy and reinforced. The walls were lined with alien tech, far more advanced than anything humanity had, but Aeliana's determination burned brighter than any technology. The doors opened with a hiss, and the first wave of resistance soldiers surged into the heart of the Malak'Ra command center. The fight was brutal, but short. The soldiers, though technologically superior, were no match for the raw desperation and survival instinct of humanity. Aeliana felt that surge of emotion. This wasn't just about winning this battle. This was humanity's defiance. "We've reached the core," Jax's voice crackled in her earpiece. Deploying charges now. But there's something you need to see. Aeliana narrowed her eyes, sensing the gravity in his words. What do you mean? Captain, we've intercepted a message from the Malak'Ra Council. They knew we'd come. This weapon, it was never meant to destroy humanity. It was meant to destroy us all. The words hit her like a physical blow. The weapon wasn't just a last-ditch effort. It was a trap, a device designed to wipe out the human resistance once and for all. The Malak'Ra had been waiting for them to come here, to walk right into their death trap. We've been played, Aeliana muttered under her breath. And as the final countdown to the weapon's detonation began, she realized the real battle wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about outsmarting an enemy who had already thought 10 steps ahead. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. The countdown clock ticked down from 5 seconds. Get out of there! Aeliana shouted, as the team scrambled to reach the exit. But the door slammed shut, locking them inside. The countdown reached 0. The darkness was suffocating. Aeliana's breath caught in her throat as she strained against the oppressive silence that followed the explosion. The room felt cold, and the sharp, acrid scent of burned circuitry filled the air. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the hard, metal surface of the command console. Her pulse throbbed in her neck as she pushed herself to stand, fighting the dizziness that had taken hold after the blast. Jax! She shouted, her voice raw in the stillness. There was no answer. Aeliana's heart pounded faster. The door to the control room had slammed shut with a deafening clang, sealing them inside. The rest of the team was scattered, no doubt fighting through the rubble to escape. The mission wasn't over. It couldn't be. The countdown to detonation was still ticking in her mind. 5 minutes until the superweapon activates. She didn't have 5 minutes. She had less. Aeliana's hand fumbled for her earpiece, and she activated it with a sharp twist. Static filled her ear before Jax's voice broke through, urgent and strained. Captain, we're locked in. The perimeter's been sealed. There's no way out unless we disable the core. Aeliana's stomach twisted as she realized what he meant. They had failed. The weapon, has it activated? She asked, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. Jax's response was quick, though tight with tension. Not yet, but the countdown is on. If we don't stop it now, we're all dead. Aeliana's fingers tightened into fists. She had trained for moments like this, but the truth was, nothing could prepare her for the devastating reality that humanity's survival hung in the balance. It wasn't just a mission anymore. It was everything they had fought for, the lives they'd sacrificed, the hope they'd clung to. I'm coming to you, she said, steeling herself. Before she could move, a loud crack echoed through the room. The sound was followed by a hissing noise, and the lights above flickered to life, dimly, flickering in time with the constant hum of the weapon's core. The countdown was speeding up. Aeliana snapped into motion. Her steps were steady, deliberate. The pressure was mounting, but she focused. She had to reach the core. She had to destroy it, destroy the weapon before it wiped out what was left of humanity. The hallway beyond the control room was in chaos. Sparks shot from the walls, and the smell of burning wires filled the air. She rounded the corner, nearly knocking over a chair as she sprinted toward the next access panel. The path was littered with debris from the blast, but she didn't hesitate. Her focus was sharp. The Malak'Ra had built this superweapon with the intention of finishing them off in one stroke. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She reached the access panel and quickly got to work. It was a delicate procedure, one that required both speed and precision. Aeliana's hands flew over the controls as she accessed the core schematics, working her way through the alien interface. The countdown timer blinked again. 2 minutes. Her heart raced. She could feel the weight of the seconds passing. The feeling of failure clawed at her chest, but she shoved it down. She could not afford to think about the consequences. There was no time. Jax, where the hell are you? She growled through the comms. We're almost there. Jax responded, his voice strained but determined. Hold on, Captain. Aeliana gritted her teeth. They couldn't afford to be slow. They couldn't afford hesitation. With the final key press, the access panel beeped. Her fingers stilled, and a wave of relief surged through her. The code was decrypted. The core was now accessible. She stepped back as the door to the reactor room hissed open. Inside, the Malak'Ra core stood at the center, encased in protective metal panels. Its red and blue lights pulsed ominously, sending waves of heat through the room. The massive device was surrounded by cables and conduits that linked it to the ship's systems. It was a monster, a device capable of wiping out entire planets in a single strike. This wasn't just a weapon. This was their doom. Aeliana took one last look at the timer. 1 minute. She moved with precision, cutting through the panels with her blade, sparks flying as she worked her way toward the core. The tension in her shoulders coiled tighter, and her mind raced through a million possibilities of what could go wrong. The core was exposed, the final piece of the puzzle. She only needed one shot, one strike to destroy it. "Captain, we've got incoming," Jax warned. "The Malak'Ra are sending reinforcements. We won't have long before they breach the perimeter." Aeliana's grip tightened on the handle of her blade. She couldn't waste time. There was no more room for hesitation. With a swift motion, she jammed the blade into the core's control panel, prying open a panel that would allow her to disable its power. The process was slow, the alien tech resisting her efforts, but she pushed through. Her vision blurred with sweat as her pulse thundered in her ears. Another minute. "Jax, I need you now!" she shouted, her hands moving frantically to disconnect the core's primary link to the ship. The comm crackled. "I'm on it!" The air grew thick with the rising tension, the countdown still ticking down, each second a ticking bomb. Aeliana could almost feel the Malak'Ra closing in. They would be too late if she couldn't destroy the core in time. Just as she reached for the final connector, the door to the room exploded open. A burst of energy slammed into her, throwing her to the floor. The blast was deafening, and Aeliana's vision spun with the impact. She struggled to sit up, pain exploding in her chest, but she couldn't stop. Not now. A shadow loomed over her. Aeliana blinked, trying to focus as the figure stepped forward. It was Zal. Her heart stopped. The man she had trusted. The traitor. "You've done well, Captain." Zal's voice was cold, almost mocking. "But you're too late. The weapon has already activated. The countdown is at 0. You've failed." Aeliana fought through the haze, the pain, the shock, and the fear. "I haven't failed yet." Zal's eyes gleamed with a twisted satisfaction. "You're already dead, Captain. And soon, humanity will be too." Aeliana gritted her teeth. "Not if I can help it." She reached for the detonator. One shot. One final chance to stop this nightmare. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. Before she could press the button, Zal's hand shot out, slamming into her wrist with a force that cracked bone. The detonator slipped from her grasp, skittering across the floor. "You're done," Zal whispered, his grip tightening. Aeliana's heart pounded in her chest. She had one choice now. One chance to stop him. With a roar, she shoved him back and lunged for the detonator, her body moving with the last surge of energy. Zal's eyes widened. The countdown flashed 0. Aeliana's world went black. The world felt like it was coming apart. Aeliana's mind buzzed as she scrambled for the detonator, her hands trembling with the raw energy of desperation. The countdown had reached 0. Zal's smug face was the last thing she saw before the lights flickered and the deep hum of the Malak'Ra core reverberated through the floor. The weapon was fully activated. She had mere seconds to stop it, to save humanity. Zal's hand locked around her wrist, and a surge of panic shot through her. His grip was like iron, unyielding, as he pulled her away from the detonator. Aeliana's pulse hammered in her chest, but she didn't have time for fear. The timer on her wrist console was ticking down, mocking her. "You should have stayed out of this, Captain." Zal's voice was smooth, condescending, like he had already won. "This was never your fight. It was always mine." Aeliana fought to maintain control, her free hand reaching for the weapon strapped to her thigh. But Zal was faster, slamming her into the cold metal wall behind her. The impact rattled her bones, but her mind was still sharp. She had been trained for moments like this. She wasn't done yet. With a grunt of effort, she shifted her weight and slammed her knee into Zal's abdomen. The force made him stagger, just enough for her to break free. She grabbed the detonator from the floor, her fingers raw from the fall. Every second felt like an eternity. "You think this will stop me?" Zal growled, recovering quickly, his eyes narrowing with disdain. "You're too late." Aeliana's breath came in ragged gasps as she aimed the detonator at the core's central control panel. The ship's alarm screamed in her ears, a stark reminder that the weapon was just a hair's breadth away from firing. With one final, defiant motion, Aeliana slammed the button. Nothing happened. Her heart froze. The core thrummed in anticipation, but the detonator remained unresponsive. Panic clawed at her chest as she frantically pressed the button again and again. Nothing. The screen flashed red, an error message. "Did you really think you could just press a button and stop me?" Zal sneered, his voice low and cold. "The core isn't just a weapon, it's a failsafe. It's tied to the entire system. It requires a specific code, one you don't have." Aeliana's stomach twisted in disbelief. He had anticipated everything. She had thought she had outsmarted him, that her final play would save humanity. But now, standing in the shadow of failure, she realized how deeply Zal had planned this betrayal. "You really thought you could just undo what I've set in motion?" Zal taunted, stepping closer to her. "You're weak, Captain. Humanity is weak." His words stung. Not because of their truth, he was wrong about humanity, but because she could feel the weight of the lives lost, the lives that had fought so hard to get to this point. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for everything humanity had left. "No," she hissed, locking eyes with him. "We're not weak. We just fight differently." Aeliana didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, driving her elbow into his face with a force that sent him sprawling backward. Blood spurted from his nose, but he recovered quickly, his expression darkening with rage. "You think you can stop this? You don't even know what you're up against." He spat, wiping his face with the back of his hand. His words were like daggers, but they only strengthened Aeliana's resolve. She wasn't about to let him win. Not when they had come so far. The core hummed louder now, its power building. Aeliana's mind raced, and then, like a flash of lightning, it hit her. The code. Zal had mentioned it. The failsafe required a specific code to be overridden, a code she didn't have. But that didn't mean she couldn't find it. "Jax," she muttered under her breath, activating her comms. "I need you to get into the core system. Now. Find the code." She didn't wait for an answer. She knew Jax. He was already working on it, his mind calculating faster than any machine. She could only hope he was fast enough. The seconds dragged on, each one a countdown to the weapon's activation. Zal was approaching her, his hands reaching for her, but she backed away, keeping her distance. She had to buy time. That was the only option left. "What are you going to do, Captain?" Zal's voice was mocking, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You're running out of time." But just as his hand reached out for her throat, the comms crackled to life. "I've got it!" Jax's voice rang through her earpiece. "The code's embedded in their data stream. I'm bypassing their encryption, give me a second." Aeliana's heart leaped. She had one chance, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. She sprinted for the core's terminal, just as Zal lunged for her. His hands grabbed her, but with a swift movement she twisted free. She threw herself against the console, her hands flying over the keys, desperately trying to override the system. "Not fast enough," Zal sneered, advancing again. But this time, Aeliana didn't falter. She didn't need to. The terminal beeped, and the screen flashed green. System override successful. Aeliana's hands flew to the core's destruction sequence, typing in the necessary commands with blinding speed. The entire ship seemed to groan, as though it knew its death was imminent. The room trembled as the core began to power down, its lights dimming. Zal's expression twisted with rage, but it was too late. "No!" he screamed, charging at her with a snarl. But Aeliana didn't flinch. She stepped aside, allowing him to crash into the now dim core. The impact was enough to send him sprawling. He looked up at her, fury and disbelief in his eyes. "You'll pay for this," he spat, but Aeliana wasn't listening. She was already halfway to the exit, her heart racing, her body screaming for rest, but she couldn't stop now. The Titan door was crumbling, and she had no intention of being caught in its collapse. As she ran down the hallway, her calms crackled again. "It's done," Jack said, his voice low and victorious. "The core's offline. The weapon is deactivated." Aeliana took a deep breath. The weight of it all hit her at once, the overwhelming relief, the exhaustion, the grief for the fallen. Humanity had survived. For now. But she knew this wasn't the end. It wasn't just about defeating the Malak'Ra. It was about rebuilding, about proving to the galaxy that humanity's fire could never be extinguished. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. As she exited the core room, a new transmission pinged in her earpiece. The voice that came through was unmistakable. "You may have won this battle, Captain Voss. But the war is far from over." The screen flickered, and there, standing on a distant ship in the stars, was a new face. A face she had never seen before, but one that carried the unmistakable mark of a new enemy. "Prepare yourselves," the voice said, chillingly calm. "The real fight is about to begin." And Aeliana knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was just the beginning.